Slide 1. Humor as play, laughter as play signal. Hello, this is John Morrell. I'm very sorry that I'm not with you this week. I had a medical emergency that required surgery, and so I've not been able to travel. This presentation is titled Humor as Play, Laughter as Play Signal. Most of the material comes from my 2009 book, Comic Relief, A Comprehensive Philosophy of Humor. Chapter 2 of that book is about the psychology of humor, and my guiding questions in that chapter are, what kind of state or condition or phenomenon is humorous amusement? What is going on in the individual person, and what is going on between people when we find something funny and when we amuse each other? Now, the traditional answer to these questions is that humorous amusement is a kind of emotion. This is the standard way of thinking of humor. I have argued in many places that this answer is highly misleading. It sets us up to think of humor as if humor were a serious state, when in fact humor is a kind of play. Emotions are serious, practically oriented states in which a person or an animal is motivated to do something that leads to its survival or the survival of the species. Amusement, on the other hand, is a disengaged state. It not only lacks practical motivations, but it blocks practical actions. To repeat, amusement is not a serious state like standard emotions. Instead, it is a play state, and it is a sophisticated play state. While amusement evolved from forms of animal play, amusement is now a higher order mental state, which is experienced only by humans, and perhaps by the few apes, like Koko the gorilla, that have learned language. Speaking of language, the ways that we talk about amusement and talk about emotions indicate that we don't actually think of amusement as an emotion. We talk about people's emotions, for example, as getting in the way of clear thinking. But we never say this of amusement. And while we often describe angry people and sad people as getting emotional, we never say that laughing people are getting emotional. We also never say to someone who is laughing hysterically, "Don't be so emotional." Nor do we ever describe a bout of hearty humor, say between friends, as an emotional event. Slide 2, Standard Emotions. I'm going to be contrasting humor with standard emotions. What I mean here is such negative emotions as fear, anger, disgust, and sadness, and such positive emotions as sexual passion and parental love. To repeat my comment of a minute ago, and today I'm going to repeat myself fairly often to drive the points home, emotions are practically oriented states in which an animal is motivated to do something conducive to its survival and or the survival of the species. Slide 3. 4 aspects of standard emotions. In standard emotions, there are 4 aspects. First, there is the cognitive aspect, beliefs and desires. Emotions are cognitive states. That is, they are about something that the person perceives or thinks about, and about something which the person has desires toward, positive desires or negative desires. Second, these beliefs and desires cause physiological changes, bodily changes, such as muscle tension, faster heartbeat, and the stopping of digestion. Third, the beliefs and desires, the cognitive part of emotion, together with the physiological changes, motivate adaptive actions They get the person or animal to do something, such as fight, or flee, or mate. The fourth aspect of emotions is that the person senses, feels the physiological changes taking place in her body. These sensations, in fact, we call feelings. That is why feelings and emotions are often used as coextensive words. This four-part theory may sound complicated, but I think you'll understand it if we look at a few examples. I'm doing this, as you'll see, to contrast these emotions with amusement. Let me start with what is probably the simplest emotion of all, which is fear. Suppose I'm on a camping trip in Arizona in the desert, and it's nighttime, and I enter my tent to get ready to go to sleep. As I slide my feet into the top of the sleeping bag, I hear a rattling sound, and I see a moving bulge in the sleeping bag. You know what the emotion is going to be here. It's going to be fear. Let me identify the four aspects or parts of this emotion of fear. First, the cognitive aspect is my belief that there's a rattlesnake in the sleeping bag and my desire to avoid being bitten by the snake. Second, the physiological changes. These include the secretion of the hormone epinephrine, the old name for which is adrenaline, and that in turn causes increased alertness and muscle tension, the release of blood sugar, a speed up of my heartbeat, shallower breathing, trembling arms and legs, blood being redistributed away from the surface of my skin, my digestion stopping. All of these physiological changes are part of my fear. And together, my belief that I am in danger, my desire to avoid that danger, and all of the physiological changes motivate me to get away from the rattlesnake. This is the adaptive action that the emotion motivates. That's obvious in the way I quickly pull my feet out of the sleeping bag and I scramble to get out of the tent. This motivation for adaptive action is the third aspect or part of the emotion of fear. The fourth part is my sensations of my pounding heart, the stopping of my digestion, my increased muscle tension, and the other bodily changes. These are what I feel as I feel fear. Now, fear is one of two fight or flight emotions. The other fight or flight emotion is anger or rage. Here, too, we can see the four aspects I've been talking about. First, the cognitive component of anger is my belief that someone or something is threatening me or has already harmed me, along with my desire to eliminate the threat or to repay the harm if it has already occurred. Second, the physiological changes in anger include the release of the hormone norepinephrine, and that hormone triggers bodily changes that get me ready to fight. Things such as increased breathing, faster heartbeat, higher blood pressure, increased muscle strength. When you're really angry, you're stronger. You're better prepared to hit or hurt someone. Third aspect of anger is the motivation, and that, of course, is the urge to overcome whatever it is that is threatening me or that has harmed me. The fourth aspect of anger are the feelings, and these are my sensations of all the bodily changes that are taking place as I get angry, such as my increased muscle tension, the increased flow of blood to the head, etc. Now, sometimes, even with fight or flight responses, we still get hurt or we lose something we value. Then the typical emotion is sadness. The injury or the loss has already occurred, so it wouldn't be productive to fight or to flee. Instead of fighting or fleeing, we slow down and we withdraw from activity. I suggest that human sadness probably evolved from the self-protective reaction of lower animals to being injured or to being sick, in which the affected part of the body is immobilized and overall bodily movement is greatly reduced. If you've ever had a pet that had a broken paw or that was sick, you've seen this kind of withdrawal from activity. Such withdrawal reduces the chances of aggravating the injury. It also conserves energy. In both ways, the withdrawal from activity fosters healing and recovery. In humans, and the higher animals too, the negative feeling tone of sadness, the suffering of sadness, serves as negative reinforcement, motivating them to prevent similar suffering in the future by not getting into situations like the one that led to the loss. In human evolution, emotions promoted the survival of not just the individual, but the group and the species. The emotions of love and pity have been especially important here. Love comes in two basic forms, sexual and parental. Sexual passion leads to mating and to reproduction. And parental love motivates nurturing of the young. Both keep the species going. Pity motivates humans to come to the aid of group members who might otherwise die. And that, of course, also keeps the group going. If my sketch of these four aspects of emotions is reasonably accurate, then we have a good basis for contrasting amusement with emotions. I'm going to argue that while emotions are serious states, which are linked to our beliefs and our desires, and are linked to practical action, humorous emotion is a non-serious state. It's a play state, which need have no connection to our beliefs and desires, and which does not motivate practical action. Slide 4. Humorous amusement. Psychologists, philosophers, and others who classify amusement as an emotion seldom give their reasons for doing so. But the usual rationale seems to be that amusement has two of the four aspects I've mentioned above. The second one is the physiological changes. The fourth one is the feelings of those changes taking place. When we are laughing about something, as when we are feeling emotions about something, there are bodily changes and sensations of those changes. For example, our diaphragms between our stomach and our lungs move up and down in spasms. Our facial muscles are contorted. In heavy laughter, our eyes may tear. We lose muscle coordination. We feel all of these changes, that is, we sense them in our bodies, and, as in positive emotions, these feelings are pleasant. We like to laugh. What I'm going to argue is that these two similarities between emotions and amusement are a very weak basis on which to categorize amusement as an emotion. If we look a little bit beneath the surface of these two similarities, namely the physiological changes and the feelings of those changes, we find some striking differences between amusement and emotions. The big one is that amusement lacks the first part, the first aspect, namely the cognitive. And it also lacks the third aspect or part, the motivational component of emotions. Psychologically speaking, I think, beliefs, desires, and motivations are more significant than the bodily changes and the feelings of those changes in emotions. To repeat, in emotions, the bodily changes are caused by beliefs and desires, and those bodily changes, along with the beliefs and desires, motivate adaptive actions. But none of these three, beliefs, desires, or motivations for adaptive actions, are required in amusement. Here's an example. Several years ago, while shopping for food, I found an eggplant that had a protuberance in the middle that looked like Richard Nixon's nose. As I looked at the eggplant, I could picture it as Nixon's head, and I found that fairly funny, so I laughed. But I didn't have to believe that the eggplant was Richard Nixon's head, nor did I need any desires about the eggplant for it to amuse me. Fear and anger, by contrast, aren't triggered this easily. Suppose that the eggplant had looked like, say, some serial killer who is currently on the loose. Seeing the eggplant as that serial killer would not have made me feel fear or anger toward the eggplant, because I would not have believed that the eggplant was threatening. The philosopher Robert Roberts has written, quote, "There is a presumption of belief dependence in the case of emotions, which is lacking in the case of amusement." Another philosopher, Roger Scruton, comments, quote, "This indifference to belief is an important feature and explains our reluctance to describe amusement as an emotion. Belief-independent fear, say a phobia of black dogs, is deemed irrational, while belief-independent amusement is not. In fact, I would add, while all standard emotions come in irrational forms, there is no such thing as irrational amusement. I call this the irrationality difference. Slide 5, the irrationality difference. Emotions can be irrational by involving irrational belief. Suppose that someone, for example, were afraid of yellow pencils. That's an irrational belief, and therefore their emotion is irrational. But amusement can't be irrational. You can laugh, of course, about something odd or absurd or irrational, but your amusement, your state of enjoying that irrationality, is not itself irrational. Since we need not believe anything about amusing objects, furthermore, we need not have desires about them either. In negative emotions, the situation that evokes the emotion matters to us. We care about it. It's important. And we want our situation to be different in negative emotions. In fear of the rattlesnake, for example, we want the rattlesnake to stay calm and not strike us. If we're afraid of a bully who threatens us, we want the bully to back off. In positive emotions, such as love, the situation matters to us and we want to keep it going. But countless jokes and cartoons and other forms of humor feature fictional situations that we know are not real, that do not matter to us, and that we don't want to change, nor do we want to maintain. Consider, for example, this cartoon, and I think you'll see what I mean. Slide 6, the cartoon of the lion ordering the pizza. To find this cartoon funny, we don't need to believe that lions use telephones. We don't need to believe that lions order or eat pizzas. And we don't need to have any desires about lions ordering pizzas. The whole cognitive aspect, which is so typical of emotion, is simply absent here. Also, nothing in this cartoon needs to matter to us at all. We don't have to care about lions or pizzas or this fictional situation of lions ordering pizzas. I suggest that with this cartoon and with thousands of others and thousands of other examples of humor, we are practically disengaged from the situation and we are emotionally disengaged from the situation. If this cartoon, for example, amuses us, our amusement is not an emotion. Slide 7. Emotions/humor. We can summarize the contrast between emotions and humor with 4 points. First, we care about the object of emotion, but we need not care at all about the object of amusement. Second, in emotions we are serious, but we are not serious in humor. Third, emotions involve a practical orientation toward the object of emotion. Something is to be gained or lost. But amusement does not involve a practical orientation. The attitude in amusement is playful rather than practical. Fourth, in emotions we see the beginnings of actions. In fear, there are actions of escape or attack beginning. In anger, the beginning actions are of attack. In sexual passion, we see the beginnings of the actions of mating. An emotion, in other words, is a warm-up for doing something. It's the beginning stage of doing something. But amusement is not an early stage of any action at all. In fact, amusement tends to block actions. And the more amused we are, the less capable we are of doing anything at all. Heavy laughter eliminates the rigidity of the upper body, and torso rigidity is essential for gross motor skills, such as throwing a spear or defending ourselves. Our breathing is interfered with in heavy laughter. Our limbs shake. We lose muscle tone and we lose coordination. Wallace Chafe has a wonderful book called The Importance of Not Being Earnest. And in that book, he argues that if we look at the biological function of laughter, it looks like the biological function is to disable us, to incapacitate us. There are still more differences between amusement and emotions. Amusement, remember, is a non-serious play state, and emotions are a serious practical state. Slide 8. The objects of emotions are people, things, or events. So far in contrasting objects of amusement and objects of emotion, I have tried to keep the two logically parallel by referring mostly to persons, things, and situations as objects of emotions and as objects of amusement. But while people, things, and situations are the objects of emotions, we are amused by more than just those categories. Bon mots, such as Oscar Wilde's quip, "Work is the curse of the drinking classes," are not persons, they are not things, and they are not situations. Also consider the comedian Stephen Wright's line, "I saw a sign that said 24-hour banking. Who's got time for that?" Or consider Rita Rudner's comment, "A friend of mine was in labor for 36 hours. I don't even want to do something that feels good for 36 hours. When we are amused at comments like these, our amusement is quite unlike the object-directed pleasure of an emotion, such as love or joy. Our amusement is not directed toward a person or a thing or a situation. Instead, we have some words from the comedian. These words elicit an unexpected sequence of ideas. We get a mental jolt from those ideas. But there isn't any thing or person or situation which serves as the object of the amusement, as there is a person, a thing, or a situation as the object of a standard emotion. Indeed, funny words don't even have to elicit funny ideas. Their sounds alone may make us laugh. I once went to a lecture about the Berber people of North Africa. In the question and answer period, somebody asked about the Berbers who live in large towns and cities. The speaker started her answer with these words. She said, well, the urban Berbers, and as soon as she said urban Berbers, the audience started to chuckle. They were not laughing at the idea of Berbers living in cities. They were simply laughing at the sounds of the words urban Berbers with the repetition of the R sounds and the B sounds. Even when the object of amusement is something real rather than something fictional, no desires are required. To feel fear, anger, or love for people is to have positive or negative desires about them. Those people I fear, I want to stay away from me. Those I love, I want close to me. But I don't have to be attracted to or repelled by things that I find funny. Suppose that we're taking a tour of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, and we look up on the altar and we see a paper plate with a chunk of cheese on it. If I find that funny, I don't have to like the cheese or dislike the cheese to find its placement on the altar funny. We often have a disinterested attitude toward things we laugh about, but you can have a disinterested attitude toward the object of one of your emotions. The objects of your emotions matter to you. You care about them. Not only do many objects of amusement not evoke desires, but there is a tension between having desires about something and finding it funny. Suppose that a friend of mine is drunk and is struggling to stand up. I won't find these awkward movements funny to the extent that I want my friend to be able to get up smoothly and safely. If I'm laughing at his movements, that means I've suspended my practical concern for him. The philosopher Henri Bergson put it this way. He said, humor requires a, quote, momentary anesthesia of the heart, close quote. Here's some more comment from Henri Bergson. Try for a moment to become interested in everything that is being said and done. Act in imagination with those who act, and feel with those who feel. In a word, give your sympathy its widest expansion, as though at the touch of a fairy wand, you will see the flimsiest of objects assume importance, and a gloomy hue spread over everything. Now, step aside. Look upon life as a disinterested spectator. Many a drama will turn into a comedy. Here, Bergson could have added the French proverb, qui sent pleure, qui pense rit, or the person who feels cries, the person who thinks laughs. From Britain, we have Horace Walpole's observation. This world is a comedy to those who think, a tragedy to those that feel. Because we need no beliefs or desires about objects of amusement, there is no need to do anything about them either. While emotions prompt us to fight, or flee, or mate, or take care of a child, or take some other action in the face of a danger or an opportunity, amusement is non-practical. It's idle. That is why, as Robert Roberts has pointed out, we explain people's actions by referring to their anger, fear, and jealousy, but not by referring to their being amused. And that's because emotions motivate you to do something. Amusement doesn't motivate you to do anything at all. When we're afraid or angry, we're ready to run away or attack. We're engaged with the situation. When we are amused, we may fall down and wet our pants. We're disengaged in the ultimate way. Since emotions engage us with the situation we're in, and amusement disengages us, they tend to suppress each other. I can't be afraid of you, or angry at you, that is, feeling the emotions of fear or anger right now, and be amused by you at the same time. Because of the natural opposition between amusement and negative emotions, we can joke with people to get rid of their fear, as when a friend is going into the hospital. We can joke to calm people down from an angry argument and to cheer them up when they are sad. And not just negative emotions suppress amusement. In sexual intercourse, for example, if one partner laughs about something, that shows a lack of passion. If they both crack up in laughter, the sex has been sidetracked, at least for the moment. Slide 9, play. Having gone into detail about the opposition between humor and standard emotions, we are now in a position to talk about humor as a kind of play and talk about laughter as a play signal. The main feature of humor that marks it as play is its cognitive disengagement and its practical disengagement. When we are out for a laugh, we are not serious. We do not care about what is true or false. We don't even care about what is right or wrong. All we care about in amusement is whether the experiences we are creating for each other bring pleasure. Play can be understood as activity pursued for its own sake, rather than to learn something or to accomplish something. The cognitive disengagement and the practical disengagement in humor is obvious in the way we talk to one another in humor. In serious communication, there are many restraints on what we may say. Rules about sincerity, truth, morality, good taste, and politeness, for example. But in humor, as long as everyone is having fun, these rules can be violated with abandon. Indeed, in a lot of humor, the play consists precisely in violating rules. Slide 10, Grice's Rules. Paul Grice is well known for formulating some basic principles governing ordinary conversation. Let me look at a few of Grice's rules to see how they can be violated in humor. Rule 1. Do not say what you believe to be false. This rule is broken all the time to create humor when we exaggerate wildly, when we are ironic and say the opposite of what we think, or when we are, as they say, pulling someone's leg, that is, telling them something we know is false just for a laugh. The violation of this rule is a staple of comedians like George Carlin. Here's a piece of George Carlin's writing. It's called Legal Murder Once a Month. You can talk about capital punishment all you want, but I don't think you can leave everything up to the government. Citizens should be willing to take personal responsibility. Every now and then, you've got to do the right thing and go out and kill someone on your own. I believe the killing of human beings is just one more function of government that needs to be privatized. I say this because I believe most people know at least one other person they wish were dead. One other person whose death would make their life a little easier. It's a natural human instinct. Don't run from it. Grice's second rule is violated for laughs when we present fantasies as if they were reasonable hypotheses. If there are rumors, for example, at work about two colleagues who are having an affair, we might say to each other, "Remember on Monday when nobody could find either one of them? I bet they were downstairs in the boiler room making hot monkey love." Rule 3. We can create humor by breaking Rule 3 when someone asks us an embarrassing question and we give an obviously vague or confusing answer. You want to know why my report contradicts the government's data? Well, I used a new database that is so secret I'm not at liberty to reveal its name. This kind of joking breaks Rule 3. Rule 4 is broken in most jokes, as Victor Raskin showed in Semantic Mechanisms of Humor. A comment, a story, or a question and answer exchange starts off with an assumed interpretation for a word or phrase. But then at the end, at the punchline of a joke, for example, we switch to a new, usually opposite interpretation for that word or phrase. Here's a very simple example from the 1930s, the comedian Mae West. She said, "Marriage is a great institution, but I'm not ready for an institution." So the ambiguity of the word institution between social custom and mental asylum is the heart of the humor here. So don't be ambiguous. That's exactly the rule that we break when we tell most jokes. Next is Rule 5. We break Rule 5 for comic effect when we give answers that are way too detailed. Instead of being brief, we go on and on and on. This rule is also violated in comic harangues, such as those of Louis Black and a few years back, Roseanne Barr. The comedian starts with a simple complaint, but then keeps adding to it. For those of you familiar with the old Monty Python show, there's a marvelous bit by Eric Idle called the Travel Agent Sketch, in which he goes on for over 3 minutes about how annoying tourists can be. Not only does humor break Grice's rules of conversation, but it often violates rules of etiquette and politeness. In being funny, we can express contempt, even hostility towards someone who is appropriately called the butt, the target of the joke. Starting in childhood, we learn to make fun of people by imitating their speech patterns, their facial expressions, and their gestures in ways that make them look awkward or stupid or pompous. To be mocked and laughed at can be taken as seriously as a physical attack might be, as the 2006 worldwide controversy over the Danish cartoons about Muhammad showed. All of this violation of language rules and rules of civil behavior in humor make humor a potentially dangerous kind of play. Obviously, if one person is breaking rules non-seriously, just to be funny and not to be aggressive, but another person sees the rule breaking as intended seriously, then the second person isn't playing. They're not in the spirit, and they can be offended. Here is where we can link humor as a kind of play with laughter as a play signal. Any good theory of humor should explain the connection between humorous amusement and the odd set of bodily events we call laughter. But surprisingly, very few theories of humor even try to explain that connection. One advantage of my approach of seeing humor as a kind of play is that we can understand laughter as a play signal. According to the dominant theory of the evolution of laughter by Ian van Hoof and others, laughter evolved as a play signal in pre-human apes. It was a way that one ape signaled to another that what was going on was only for fun and not to be taken seriously. Serious reactions, such as emotions, were not called for. In the play of pre-human apes, such as chimps and gorillas, there aren't any linguistic rules to break, of course. Instead, most of the rules broken are about respect for other animals. Most forms of play in the anthropoid apes are modified forms of aggression, like chasing, wrestling, and biting. Obviously, a chimp or an early human who wanted to make a game out of chasing or wrestling or biting, who who wanted to play with these ordinarily aggressive activities needed a way to indicate that they only wanted to play. They were not in a serious attack mode. According to Ian van Hoof and others, the visual and the vocal pattern of behavior that we call laughter served as this signaling device. In laughter, the mouth was open and the teeth were not clenched, for example. That looks very different from the mouth of a serious attacker, whose teeth are obviously ready to shred some skin, if not some bones and arteries. Also, the rhythmic spasmodic breathing of laughter was quite different from the breathing of an attacker. As laughter evolved in humans, it also came to include the loss of upper body muscle control and loss of muscular coordination generally. Without that control, it's obvious that the laughing person is not going to attack anyone. All of these visual and auditory cues or signals send a simple message. I'm not out to hurt you. I just want to play and have fun with you. Slide 11. Laughter as play signal. Here is a nice example of what I've been talking about. I teach at the College of William and Mary in Virginia in the U.S. The college was founded by the King and Queen of England in the year 1693. A few years ago, Queen Elizabeth II visited the college, and she was joined by our college president and by the governor of Virginia. Now, you can't hear the vocal spasms of their laughter, but you can certainly see the non-serious, non-practical mood signaled by their facial expressions and by their bodily postures. It's pretty obvious that nobody here is being aggressive or is preparing for any aggression. For one thing, their eyes are almost closed. Aggression requires seeing your opponents clearly. Also, notice that the two men have open mouths with unclenched teeth. That's quite different from the mouth posture of someone who is aggressive. Now, the queen, who's seated in the middle, was raised not to open her mouth when she laughs, but you can tell that she would love to be able to open her mouth. It's only politeness and manners that keep her from doing that. As this picture shows, humor has developed far past mock-aggressive play, as it was, for example, in the pre-human apes. By the way, we separated from chimps and gorillas in evolution about 6 million years ago. But laughter still serves as a play signal. When laughter as a play signal is absent from humor, our attempt at humor might be misinterpreted and could even elicit emotions such as anger or fear. That's what happens when someone has to explain, I was only joking, I wasn't serious. A good example of what can happen when humor is not signaled by laughter is a comic routine done many times by Andy Kaufman, in which he crowned himself Women's Wrestling Champion of the World. Slide 12. Andy Kaufman. Kaufman bragged that he could defeat any woman alive, and he went around the country wrestling women. Kaufman's television fame as a comedian on Saturday Night Live was not enough of a play signal for many in his audiences, and so in several cities, angry women came forward, intent not just on pinning Kaufman to the mat and winning the $1,000 prize, but on actually hurting him. We can think of this stunt as a kind of practical joke, but one that is missing the revelation that it's only for fun and isn't serious. The lesson here is that when we switch from a serious to a play mode, We need a way of letting people know what we are doing and saying is not serious. Otherwise, they may be offended and may even take violent action against us. Slide 13. I love this wonderful albino gorilla. Thinking about the connection between humor and laughter can prompt many more questions. One is the nature of smiling. Is smiling a different phenomenon from laughing? Or is a smile just the beginning of a laugh? Is smiling a weak form of laughing? Here I like the speculations of the ethologist Jan van Hoof, who I referred to before. He thinks that the first play signals in humans evolved from two instead of two facial displays in early primates. One was what he calls the silent bared teeth display, also called the grin face or the social grimace. This is seen clearly on this gorilla. This, he says, probably evolved in human beings into social smiling. The other facial display was what he calls a relaxed open mouth display, or a play face. And this, he says, probably evolved into laughter. In the silent bared teeth display, which became the smile, the corners of the mouth and the lips are retracted, exposing the gums. The jaws are closed. There is no vocalization. Body movement is inhibited, and the eyes are directed toward an interacting partner. In most primates, this grin is similar to the aggressive, staring, open-mouth display evoked by threats, and it appears to have evolved from that aggressive face. The bared teeth grin seems to have started both as a protective response, drawing back the lips is a preparation for either biting or expelling something noxious from your mouth, and as a response to startling stimuli. Van Hoof speculates that in the evolution of primates, there was a progressive broadening of the meaning of baring the teeth. Originally it was defensive, but over time it became a signal of submission and non-hostility. In species like ours, the silent bared teeth display became what he calls a reassuring and finally a friendly signal, the social smile. So we smile at someone when we want them to relax and to not feel tension with us. The second facial display Van Hoof studied is the relaxed open mouth face that primates show during playful chasing and mock fighting. When one animal is really attacking another, the mouth is tense and prepared to bite. Playful biting, by contrast, is gentle and doesn't break the skin. So it is preceded by the relaxed open mouth display, which, because it looks so different, is not seen as threatening. The visual display of the play face is usually accompanied by a sound stimulus, shallow staccato breathing, similar to panting, which in chimpanzees is vocalized as ah, ah, ah. Bonobos, gorillas, orangutans, baboons, and rhesus macaques make similar laugh-like sounds. Together, the play face and the shallow staccato breathing send the message, this is just play, not real fighting. An easy way to elicit that face and vocalization in apes is through the playful grabbing and poking that we call tickling. They also show that face and vocalization during rough and tumble play. In human evolution, according to Van Hoof and others, the friendly, silent, bared teeth display became our social smile of appeasement. The relaxed open mouth display and its accompanying vocalization became laughter. As humans began walking upright, the front limbs were no longer used for walking and running, and so the muscles in the thorax no longer had to synchronize breathing with locomotion. That, combined with the lower position of the larynx, the voice box, in the throat, and the development of the pharynx, made it possible for humans to modulate their breathing and vocalize in more complex ways than the cries and the calls of the lower primates. They eventually would develop speech, but before that they came to laugh in our uniquely human ways. Instead of the chimp vocalization, ah, 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 on the in-breath, early humans produced the ha, ha, ha on the out-breath. And with breathing no longer linked to locomotion, they did not have to exhale once per step, as apes have to inhale once per step. While moving, their laughter could take lots of forms and come in lots of rhythms. Eventually, the guffaw, the titter, the chuckle, the horse laugh, the snicker, the giggle, etc. As humor research continues, I hope that some of the issues I've raised get more attention, and maybe you will be one of the people who adds to these discussions. Let me summarize my views here. The standard treatment of humorous amusement as an emotion is misleading because it lumps amusement together with non-serious, non-playful mental states. Emotions evolved in the lower mammals as practical adaptations to dangers and opportunities. They involve practical orientations to real situations. Someone or something that we love or hate, someone or something that scares us or makes us angry, is evaluated in a positive or negative way, as good or bad, and we are motivated to act appropriately by getting more involved with the person or thing, or less involved with the person or thing. In emotions, the person or thing matters to us. We care about it. Amusement, by contrast, is not a practical adaptation to dangers and opportunities, and it does not involve the cognitive and practical engagement of beliefs, desires, and adaptive actions. Amusement and standard emotions, then, involve different orientations to the world. Emotions involve cognitive and practical engagement. We are serious, we are not playing, we are focused on dangers and opportunities, and we are prepared to act to further our interests. The mental framework of emotions is real, here, now, me, practical. Amusement, by contrast, involves cognitive and practical disengagement from what is going on around us. We are not serious, not concerned about dangers and opportunities, and not prepared to act. As humor research continues, I suggest, we need to pay more attention to the distinctions that I've made today, especially between serious practical states and non-serious playful states, such as humor. Thank you very much.